I'm ready whenever you are, Sarah.
I'm ready.
If I could call public service to order. If I could, if you could do a roll call, Sarah. I don't know where my slip is.
Mosley,
Aye.
Kamer,
Aye.
Holland,
Aye.
Lombardo,
Aye.
McKittrick.
Aye.
All committee members are present.
All right, thank you. If I could get a motion of, and approval of our previous meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
The ayes have it. We have several pieces coming before us today. The first one is an ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service to enter into a contract or contracts after publicly advertising for bids for temporary concrete installation over excavations of the Division of Water Distribution and Sewer Maintenance prior to final pavement surface repairs by the Division of Highway Maintenance, approving specifications therefore and declaring an emergency. Mr. Leto?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and members of committee. Did they get you a new UCR?
They're working on it now. Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted, this legislation is for $500,000, and in that UCR that was attached, it was the wrong one. So it's $400,000 for water and $100,000 for sewer. And these are those large excavations that we get into on one of those large breaks. Typically they're, you know, a typical hole for water and sewer is 6 foot by 11 foot, but these could be 50, 60 feet long. So we contract out these large breaks. Now, last year we did put legislation for $750,000. We lowered it to $500 because we didn't have as many breaks as we did in the past. So consent is fine. I will answer any questions, but this is typical. We do this every year.
Okay. Any questions from committee members? Any questions from council members? Councilman Malik?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Lettle. Is this the kind of contract where we could potentially break it up in order to get more contractors involved in this process?
We could, yes. I mean, this obviously doesn't take a large contractor to do this type of work, but we could do that like we did with the sidewalk program in the future.
Okay, just wondering.
Yep.
Okay. Can I get a motion for consent?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Next piece is an ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service or his designee, after publicly advertising for bids, to enter into a contract or contracts for the purchase and installation of fire hydrants for the 2023 hydrant replacement program and declaring an emergency. Mr. Leto?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of committee. As you know, we have about 12,500 fire hydrants in our system. This legislation will allow us to purchase 60 new hydrants and bid out the installation of these hydrants. We do allow these in-house, but this will just let us catch up. Right now, we have less than 1% that are out of service, and as you know, we'll fix 10 and 2 will get hit by a car or a break or whatever, so it's kind of a constant thing. So I would like to pass this. I will take any questions so we can get this bid and start replacing these hydrants with a contractor.
Okay. Any questions from committee members? Any questions from council members? Any questions? No? Okay. Can I get a motion for suspension of rules?
I'll make that motion to suspend the rules.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it. Next piece is the ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service or his designee, after publicly advertising for bids, to enter into a contract or contracts for the painting of fire hydrants in the city and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of committee. As I mentioned before, we have 12,500 fire hydrants. We started this 5-step process about 8 years ago, hoping to extend the life of this painting between 5 and 10 years. So we have approximately about 1,000 left in the original program, so that will help us clean the rest of those up and get them painted. And then in some of those high traffic areas on main streets where they get constantly hit with salt and debris, we're not getting the 10 years. So some of these hydrants will be on a 5-year rotation where we go back in and we repaint them. We had 7 contractors pull plans to bid this, and Tamarius was low bid. They have been doing this for us. They've been low bid for the last 7 years or 8 years. With that, I will take any questions.
Okay. So, Chris, you said there's 1,000 left out of 12,000 hydrants?
12,500,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
in our whole system,
In the whole
yes.
system, okay. Any questions from committee members? Any question from council members?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Councilwoman Amobian?
Sorry, I can't find my hand raise symbol. I have it hidden somewhere. I'm just curious, Mr. Ludlow. I know that we've had a discussion about this many times. Is this the $1 million contract that we have with Tamara's?
Well, over the life of the contract, yes. I mean, I can't tell you exactly, this is probably the 3rd or 4th time we've put this out to bid, okay? So this particular piece is for, let's see. But yes, as the contractors have painted the 10,000 or 12,000 hydrants, it probably is over $1 million, yes, ma'am.
So he still has 1,000 to paint, or we're talking about this is a new contract with someone?
No, this is a brand-new contract, because we did not bid all 12,500 8 years ago. You know, we put this bid out to do 2,300 a year, basically, for the last 5 years. I
So
can't,
how much do they charge us per year for that?
well, this particular one that he's bidding now, or he was low bid on, is $250,000.
Per year?
This is a one-year contract, yes.
250,000?
Yes.
For 1,000 hydrants?
No, he's gonna paint more than that because his bid was just over $100 a hydrant to do. So this is to paint, this current legislation is for 2,300 hydrants, ma'am.
For 2,300. Well, let me ask you this. I know we've had this discussion in the past, and I'm just asking out of curiosity because the more we, talk to other communities, different people are doing it different ways. You have community groups, you have special needs children. You have different kinds of individuals that are taking the responsibility of painting fire hydrants. Have we ever thought about looking into other less expensive, more community engagement kind of processes to do this?
What we did in the past before we started this process is we would hire seasonal employees, and basically all they would do was wire brush off the hydrant and then hand paint them. So we did hire employees every year to do this, but we found that the painting job was only lasting a year or two at best. So we went to what best practices were with other municipalities, and they said, you have to go in there and totally strip it down. Sandblast it off, totally strip it down to bare metal, primer it, and then put on a coat of epoxy, then another coat of paint, and then, as you know, we have different domes on our hydrants, okay? There's red,
I know. Some
there's
red,
orange,
some blue,
and obviously, Councilman McKittrick can tell you, they look for the white ones, because those are the highest volume, and they get the most water flow out of them, so they have to go back. So they have to go back that many times, and that's the way we bid it. We bid it, this is what the new process is gonna be, and so we went down this road to extend the life out of these hydrants, not only for the painting of them, but extend the life on operations and maintenance also. Because they remove the caps, they put the caps back on, they grease them as they go. They don't exercise them. That's through our fire department. They go in and exercise these hydrants. I want to be clear on that.
So when they paint them, you said it should last 5 years?
What we've found, some are lasting longer because they're not in those high traffic areas, but the ones on high traffic areas that get hit with salt and debris, it seems like we're only getting about 5 to 6 years out of those hydrants. That's why we're going to go back with this contract and finish up what we didn't hit originally, and then clean up or start the rotation on some of those that need to be repainted more than 5 years ago.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from committee members, council members? Chris, what's your pleasure? Oh, Councilman Neal?
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, we've tried to justify spending $1 million on fire hydrants so many ways. It's documented that when we started this program that we were supposed to change and use citizens because we knew it was an exorbitant expense to pay that much to paint fire hydrants, especially for a city that is fiscally challenged. Why this came in after the elections is troubling. For Tamari's Painting that financed several campaigns, has put money into several people's political runs. This is, and now they have a parcel on White Pond. This is more than trouble. Mr. Mobian asked, back when John Moore had your position, it was promised, and it's documented, it was in the paper, it was promised that we would create a citizens component to paint fire hydrants. Because this isn't sophisticated. Other communities use either community service workers or use summer employment youth programs, or just have people volunteer to paint them. It doesn't get any clearer than this of pay to play here in the city of Akron. That's why this legislation was pulled before election and brought in today. You can't justify it any other way. And for this council to vote on this and not scrutinize this contract is doing a disservice to the citizens of Akron.
Any other questions or comments from council or committee members? Councilman Fusco?
Yes, thank you. We had heard the service director had mentioned the way we used to do business in terms of painting fire hydrants. They had taken the time, gone out, and discovered what best practices were, and then sought bids. It sounds like perennially. This is the, I don't know if it's every year that we bid this, but this is bid, and the lowest and best bidder is getting it. I don't know another way of looking at it, but this is the best practice, and I assume also, Mr. Luddle, that this extends the life of the paint job that's done whenever you do it right, and you have someone who professionally does this for a living. For Pete's sakes, I understand that this company also has painted bridges in New York City, who has painted a number of even the space, NASA has worked with NASA to extend the life of those vehicles. And so it just makes sense to do what is best in terms of the, especially whenever it comes to fire hydrants. Thanks.
Councilman Malik?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Luddle, I know we've heard from Mr. Neal several times since I've been on council about this issue. Can you talk a little bit about what consideration has been given to, for lack of a better word, ordinary citizens doing this work, and why that is not the direction the administration would like to go in?
Well, this particular program, we looked at it. We looked at where they're at. They're in the right of way, okay? They're, you know, you just can't stick anybody with no experience out there close to the street or on the street working, okay? We looked at best practices, and it is to strip the thing all the way down to bare metal, primer it, paint it, come back, exercise it. So doing it in-house, we never did that. What we would do, as I mentioned before, we'd hire seasonals, we would scrape it off with a wire brush, and we would hand paint them. We had a supervisor that would monitor them, and we start looking at that, what that costs us each year, and we didn't feel like we were extending the life of the hydrants. So these are an important component in our system. We did advertise on Bonfire this year, which goes out to every contractor, minority contractors, and what we're finding this year and last, 7 companies pulled plans. They were the only one that bid, okay? I'm having the same trouble right now with speed tables. We advertise, it doesn't take a backhoe, it doesn't take the special equipment that a lot of small companies complain, we just don't want to do that investment for a $200,000 program. Well, it does take something to, you know, the process that was set up, it does take a special piece of equipment to strip it down and then to spray paint it and then go back. Why they didn't bid, I can't answer that, okay? You know, if we pull it and bid it again, it doesn't seem like, and we did hold this for a few weeks to see if we get anybody else to bid, okay? It was held, and then we said, well, we might as well just hold it till we get the bids in and then bring the legislation in, and that's what we did, okay? This was on the agenda a few, I don't know, 3 weeks or a month ago, but the bids weren't in. So I said, try to get more people to bid. They pull plans and they don't bid. I don't understand why we can't get companies to bid on something like this. As you mentioned, it doesn't take a high skill level. It doesn't take a lot of special equipment. Why aren't they bidding? I don't know. I can't answer that.
I appreciate that, Mr. Little. When did the bids come in, the last bid?
I'd have to.
You don't have to get back to us
Yeah,
right
I
now.
don't know what it is.
Yeah.
I'll get it for you.
But the point is that obviously it was not held because of an election. It was held because you wanted to get bids in. Okay. Okay, I know there are a number of others, so thank you.
Mr. Neal? Oh, wait, I'm going to go to Councilwoman Holland first, then to you, Russ. Councilwoman Holland?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think some of my questions were actually asked and answered by Councilman Malik and the Service Director. I'm glad to hear that this was put out on Bonfire. And I guess I'd like to sort of pick your memory, Mr. Little, if I may, going back to the first time that you advertised for bids in your tenure as Service Director. Was it necessary, by your recollection, to train, I guess, to sort of detail beyond what's in the specs for the RFP on something like this? Does the City Service Department actually train and or provide the specialty equipment to the successful low bidder, if you recall?
We do not. So when we set up this new process of what we wanted, we didn't own any of that equipment. So if we would have wanted to go down that road, we would have had to purchase all that equipment. And we looked at it and we said, okay, we have to hire this many more people, okay? We have to buy this new equipment that obviously you'd have to maintain. And it's like, Water looked at it and they said, it'd be better if we just sub out this process, okay? We just sub it out. And that's what we decided to do.
Probably much of this driven by the cost of labor, correct?
Labor and then benefits and then the equipment, yes. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying. Appreciate it.
Councilman Neal?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to remind the group, and I sent an email to you, Madam Chair, and to our clerks so that it can be forwarded to the rest of the council and anybody else that wants the information. The article that was documented in the Beacon Journal from 2014, where worked with our ASME union president at that time, George Johnson, to put together a plan where citizens could paint the fire hydrants. save the city money. As has already been stated here, this is not a high-tech job. This was an opportunity for us to engage citizens in the process. Wouldn't cost the city anything but the paint. And working with ASME Union, an ASME Union supervisor overlooking the job. This here, let me make it clear, is a political pay-to-play contract. Plain and simple. It is the responsibility of this council to address these types of things when we see them clear as day. There's other ways that contracts come through the city that are a little bit more cloudy and we can't identify them. But folks, this is fire hydrants. These are fire hydrants. It's not sophisticated. And so, and some people will not be able to, should not even speak on this, and will not be able to even vote on this because they receive money from Tamari's payment. This is very problematic. And yes, we've been dealing with this for years. So again, this contract for $250,000, which is more now than what it was when it was first passed to paint the fire hydrants, should not be approved by this council. Look at the historical notation where John Moore promised that the city will create a citizens component. But then Mayor Horgan came in with his blue ribbon task force that supposedly scoured the city's budget to make sure that we were fiscally responsible with our expenses. But we did not touch that $1 million fire hydrant painting contract. Interesting why we didn't touch it, because again, Tamarius finances a lot of campaigns. So now, council, we have this information. It's up to us to do the right thing.
Chris, I have a question. 1 second, Councilwoman Holland. I'm trying to send you an email. For whatever reason, I can't even get in my emails. I don't know if there's something going on with the server, but I want to send you an article on, I'm sure you may have seen it in the past. His name is Dale Kiefer from Medina County. And what they did in Medina was they did an adopt a hydrant program up there, which saved the city a lot of money. Just something we can think about going down the road is, you know, we have these academies in the public schools, and I know we have the EMS Fire Academy, maybe even utilizing those students in the future to do this work, because this is the field in which they want to stage a career in. It's just something for us to think about going down the road, and maybe even having that partnership with whomever the bid goes through is bringing those students into the fold, because now they would be considered city summer employees, and now they could probably go over to, I don't know, Stark State while they're waiting to get into the fire academy. Just things to think about down the road that I think would be very beneficial to us as a city. If this went through Bonfire, I don't have any worries. I haven't gotten any campaign contributions from them, so I'll be bidding on it. I mean, you know, I'll be, you know, sending this out of the committee because I don't have any contributions from them. But for the future, I think we need to think about how we can involve our academies and those students in the academies down the road.
Duly noted. I think what we need to do is get water distribution, Akron Fire, and talk about this and see what it looks like.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Because actually, you know, Akron Fire is the one that uses them. Okay.
Right.
So we have to, you know, we have to make sure that they're maintained right. And obviously, fire hydrant painting, I mean, I don't know what this has to do with campaign finance. They bid on the project, okay? And 7 people pulled plans, and they were low bid, okay? So.
Right, okay. Councilwoman Holland, and then Councilman Freeman, and then Councilwoman Amodian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess since we're all making this disclosure, I'll just say up front that I'm not a recipient of the successful bidders' contributions either. I was sorely tempted, because he's a member of the committee, to ask Councilman McKittrick to weigh in. I suspect that the painting and maintenance of fire hydrants is something that is way outside of any of our wheelhouses, and that the details matter a great deal. You know, I love the ideas specifically put forward by Councilwoman Mosley about taking a closer look at this, because we are talking about real money. And we are a city that should constantly be looking at how we are spending the taxpayers' real money. We are also a city that should be constantly looking at opportunities for all of our citizens. I would just like to put out there that in my somewhat narrow experience as a non-professional painter, that successful painting of most surfaces is about 90% prep. And if I'm understanding the nature of this work, the really difficult and technical aspect of this work that's been let for bid is in the actual preparation, the care that's necessary in stripping the existing paint and cleaning this crucial equipment, crucial safety equipment, and preparing it for paint. I suspect, this has been suggested many times in the horseshoe, that the actual painting is something that is doable. And I think that we are, you know, we're wise to constantly look at opportunity to simplify, to save money, and to also welcome ordinary citizens like us into the circle of contributing and helping us tighten the belt, especially when it's so needed. Bonfire is a useful tool. I think it's one that we should underline and point to whenever we're talking about the public bidding process. I think it's fair to say that most of us understand that we must constantly be improving our efforts to make public contracts less mysterious and more accessible, more available to the little guys, because it's the little guys who are carrying Akron. That is the nature of things right now. We are 50 years out from the era of the industrial giants here. So I think that the discourse has been really helpful. I think that we are wise to be mindful that this equipment is crucial. I spent yesterday at a fire scene and was reminded all over again that details matter. And I appreciate the patient explanation of exactly what's involved in all of this. Thank you.
Councilwoman Amobian?
I thought you were going to recognize Mr. Friedman first, since I've spoken already. Did you want to do that, Madam Chair?
He said that's fine. You can go, and then Councilman Freeman can go thereafter.
I couldn't hear you, I'm sorry.
You're fine. Go ahead. Mr. Freeman's going to go after you.
Oh, okay, thank you. The comment I wanted to make is, I understand, and correct me, Mr. Ludlow, if I'm not correct, this is a one-year contract, right?
Correct.
Okay. And the reason I'm pointing that out is, I have as many concerns about this as Mr. Neal has outlined, and we've questioned this for years now. Since this is a one-year contract and we know we're gonna have a new administration, perhaps we can start exploring some other ways of looking at this, because I'm not really sure what other major cities are doing. I would imagine they're doing a combination of things, because when we go to NLC, that's who I talk with, and I'm sure that's who Mr. Neal has spoken with as well, because other people are doing all kinds of things to do this. I can understand needing maybe a more professional person to do the main streets where you have the high volume of salt and all those kinds of things. But the neighborhood fire hydrants, I think there are lots of ways that we can explore to look at painting those, because this is quite expensive. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you very much.
Councilman Freeman, then Councilman McKittrick, and then Councilman Neal.
I just wanted to reiterate what Councilwoman Holland said, and maybe refute a bit what Mr. Lovell said. I know this is not technical, but this prep work, the prep work is important, and honestly, if the Freeman House catches on fire, I want to make sure that there's a functioning fire hydrant. As far as the accusation of, pay to play or whatever, this was put out on contract. And it was put out there, it was advertised that way. I'm not sure what the question is there. Now, if this is something that would have been awarded without contract, yeah, we have a lot of things to look at, but this is something that was placed out there, so anybody that's listening, we just want to make sure that we underline that, yes, this was put out for bid, this was the low bidder, but I think this council needs to be very, 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 very careful with the way we handle our fire hydrants. That is a lifeline between maybe our families. So thank you for the time, Madam Chairman.
I just want to say a quick thing.
Councilman McKittrick?
Thanks, Madam Chair. First and foremost, has been questioned. I have had no donations from this lowest bidder as well, but I can say that I probably have more experience in regard to this than the rest of the city council put together. It is important. Yes, it's simple, but there are moving parts. At 3 o'clock in the morning, when an engine company's rolling down the road looking for a hydrant, while there's more calls coming from dispatch saying there's people trapped, multiple calls, it's dark, sometimes there's cars in the way. It's important to find a hydrant that's working, that's not out of service, and the color is important because it tells you how many gallons per minute you're gonna get. And if you're in your home, up on your porch roof, waiting for somebody to come and put water on the fire, it's of utmost importance. And I can tell you, I've looked at how other municipalities have painted hydrants. I've seen where they paint by hand. And our hydrants, depending upon the size and the type of the hydrant, has different caps on it, different size caps. Ours vary from different municipalities for different types of threading. So if we roll in with Catawba Falls or Fairlawn or another municipality, we might have to have adapters to be able to hook on hydrants if they're not ours, or an outlying community comes in to help us. If they're painted by hand and they get paint on these caps, it may be difficult for our firefighters to get those caps off. It's got the top portion of it where you put the wrench on it to open. It's a special type of wrench because in the past, years and years ago, people would open the hydrants in the summertime to enjoy the water. Well, that can't be the case. And so since you have these areas where you could build up excess paint on there, it would be an issue. So actually spray painting, the way this is done, and not by hand, the way this company does it, when they actually sandblast it, somebody would have to have special equipment. I don't know that some, family person or a community, we're going to adopt a hydrant, we're going to, rent a sandblaster or something like that. That's not going to be the case. I'm sure if somebody wanted their car painted, they're not going to paint it by hand. They're going to have to spray paint it because it's it holds up better and it's a better type of paint. And these are special paints, the primer as well, and the paint that goes on these hydrants. So, yeah, it is, to do it properly, it is a very specialized process. Thank you very much.
Councilman Neal?
Yes, ma'am. Before I ask, I have several questions. The first one, how much has been awarded, paid out so far to pay fire hydrants? I may have missed that in the earlier, but total, how much? Because this started before the Oregon administration. So how much has been paid out in total to paid fire hydrants thus far?
I don't have that number, sir.
Can you get it for us before this evening, sir?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Again, I'd like for everyone, I sent the article to you, Madam Chair, and to our clerk, so that people could pull up the 2014 article and read that article. Again, we worked with ASME to put together a plan that John Moore promised the administration would put together so that our citizens could pay hydrants. As far as communities that were looked into, we looked at Barberton, Stowe, Cuyahoga Falls, even looked down, pulled an article from a fire chief in Cincinnati that walked out, a community outside of Cincinnati, walked out and saw his fire hydrant was rusty and asked citizens if they would want to volunteer to paint their fire hydrants. They provided paint and a brush. This is a fire hydrant. Some of the things that we're talking about, being able to find a fire hydrant, GPS units, that's those technologies. If we need to invest in those, yes. But I can take you through most communities and find fire hydrants that are down, broken, rusted out, if these are such high priority items. Again, I ask that for historical context, that everyone read the article that was, I think it was written in 2014. Stephanie Warsmith wrote the article. And that's the one where, again, worked with ASME Union and John Moore to come up with an alternative, which was supposed to be the alternative. I believe it was 2014, I may be off, but that was almost 10 years ago since we started this. So I would like to know again, how many fire hydrants have been painted since then? How much have we paid? And I would urge this council to take time before spending this kind of money to paint fire hydrants.
Thank you, Mr. Neal. I'm gonna let Mr. Lombardo go, but I probably will take time till we get the numbers just for, I'm gonna forward council the email as well. Mr. Lombardo?
Thank you. I just want to say, you know, I'm sure we've all heard the saying, you know, penny wise and pound foolish. I mean, I don't think we want to get into this situation where we could get this job done, cheaply, I suppose, you know, whether it's residents, high school students, you know, but we don't want to be cheap here and then have to do it again, you know, maybe next year or in 2 years. Let the professionals do the work. It's like $100 a fire hydrant, and, you know, they have the right materials, they know the job. Let the professionals handle the situation, okay? Because, again, it'll just be, you know, we can avoid all these logistics of, you know, getting the community together and let's go do these fire hydrants in this neighborhood. We can avoid all those logistics and maybe even some legal issues with, who knows, where paint's going to be spilling all over somebody's lawn or sidewalk, or, you know, cars buzzing by. So my vote is just to go with this ordinance, obviously, and not be penny wise and pound foolish. Thank you.
Madam Chair, there's been a lot of questions, that request for information. If I could just get an email, I really would appreciate it. And I will get everything answered.
Thank you.
Just to make sure, you know,
Yeah.
I answer these questions, which I think I wrote down correctly, but an email would really help so I can get everything answered.
Okay, I'll make sure you get the email. Can I get a motion for time?
So moved.
I'll second it. Can I get a roll call, Sarah?
Mosley,
Aye.
Kamer,
Nay.
Holland,
Aye.
Lombardo,
Nay.
and McKittrick.
Nay.
The motion for time fails by a vote of 2 to 3.
Okay.
Can I make a motion for suspension of the rules?
Second?
Can I do a roll call here as well? Thank you. Mosley,
Nay.
Kamer,
Aye.
Holland, Councilwoman Holland, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I said aye.
Thank you. Lombardo
Aye.
and McKittrick.
Aye.
That motion passes 4-1.
Okay. Ordinance number 8, we're on an ordinance authorizing the purchasing agent to enter into a contract or agreements through the TIPS National Purchasing Cooperative with Duralast Inc. for the construction of the John S. Knight Center roof replacement project and declaring an emergency. Mr. Ludlow?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of committee. The John S. Knight Center is owned by the city of Akron, obviously. We are responsible in our contract to replace that roof. The roof is original, 1993. It's obviously severely aged, and there's been numerous leaks over the years that we've had to patch in. We are using the TIPS National Purchasing Cooperative to bid this or to accept proposals for this roof overlay. We've gone through a couple different processes, and this is going to be, it's going to meet the UL standard 96A. It's a 20-year, no dollar limit warranty from the manufacturer, and this is basically just to put a new roof on John S. Knight Center.
Okay, any questions from committee members? Any questions from council members? Seeing none, can I get a motion for suspension of the rules?
I'll make
So
a
moved.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Next piece is ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service or his designee to apply for, and if awarded, accept and enter into a grant agreement with the Ohio Department of Transportation, ODOT, for funding for the replacement of concrete panels near the FBO and a taxiway R, replacement of the beacon, the decoupling, and the taxiway B, and pavement markings on taxiway P at the Akron-Fulton Airport, and declaring an emergency. Mr. Ludlow?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, those 4 projects we are applying for with grant money. This is our typical FAA ODOT grant where it's 95 to FAA/ODOT and 5% to us. We are applying for more money than is probably out there. We wouldn't know if we're awarded to do these projects the next year, but the concrete replacement is in really bad shape right next to flight-based operation. That's where the helicopters land. The decoupling of taxiway B, that's all the way on the south end of the runway, and we're worried about if somebody would get down there on Exeter and go through the fence, they could actually drive onto the runway, so we want to decouple that. Pavement markings, that's to replace all the pavement marking on the taxiway. And the last thing is the beacon on top of the air dock. We'd like to replace that to LED. Like I said, this is just authorizing us to apply for these grant funds and projects that would be basically next year. Consent's fine on this. This grant is not due for about a month.
So on the estimated schedule on the design part, the design, is that part of the grant funding as well, or pay for the design?
Yes, CNS, they're our contractor out there. They do all our design work.
What's the alternative if we don't receive the grant?
If we don't, well, we've been pretty successful. We'll probably get something. We're hoping to at least get $500,000 out of this.
Okay. All right, any questions from committee members? Any questions from council members? Wait, Councilwoman Holland?
Thank you, Madam Chair. When we were going through our operating budget process, I think it's fair to say that some of us noticed that the airport continues to be a significant expense for the city. Mr. Luddle, in the event that the grant funds received, and I heard you just now, it would be unusual for us not to get anything, but if the grant funds received fell substantially short of the expense of these proposed maintenance and improvement measures, would there be a scaling back then of these planned measures, or some other action taken to bring the expected expenses, I guess, to pull them back, bring them into line with what was received? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, if we're not successful, then there'll be no design, okay? So yes, we would save money that way. We wouldn't do the project, if that was your question. I mean, if we're not successful, we're applying for these 4 different things, but if they only fund 2 of them, then, you know, there's only gonna be a design on 2 of them, which really isn't, there's not really a lot of design work in this at all. It was pretty much, CNS is helping us prepare the application to be successful.
That's what it sounded like, and I think you just now, just the last remarks, addressed my question. In other words, if the full amount sought is not received, then the plan would be scaled back to comport with what was received, correct?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Very good, thank you.
What's your pleasure, Chris?
Consent's fine.
Can I get a motion for consent?
Motion for consent.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. Next piece is ordinance authorizing the mayor as designee, if awarded, to accept and expend grant funds from the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, Solid Waste Infrastructure and Recycling, what is that, Swiffer?
Swiffer.
Swift? Okay. Grant program, and to enter into a grant agreement or agreements with the EPA and declaring an emergency. Mr. Luddle?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of committee. This is something that Emily Collins here is going to talk about. Jim Hall's done a lot of work on this, this Swiffer grant, and we're pretty excited about it. When Emily's done, I could chime in a little bit more, but we would like to try to pass this today so we can get this submitted. So with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Collins.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So there are 4 components to this grant, and it's a significant amount of funding that we're requesting, over $3 million. The first component has to do with route optimization software, tablets and laptops that would be accompanied by front-facing cameras in all sanitation trucks. The second component would be new electrical service to support fleet electrification for much of our service fleet. And the third component is, you may have heard us talk briefly about a pilot program for glass recycling that would be separate from the single stream. So making that more permanent infrastructure and for glass is something that we're seeking with this grant, and that would reduce contamination. And then the fourth component, which we think is absolutely critical and to which we seek a 2-year investment in, has to do with public outreach for the entirety of our recycling program. So those 4 components, you know, this is a competitive grant process, and it's based on the bipartisan infrastructure law. We are interested in track 1. There are 2 tracks for submission, and that would benefit disadvantaged communities. Akron is over 60% disadvantaged. Thank you.
Any questions from committee members? Any questions from council members? Councilwoman Holland?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to drop in here and thank Ms. Collins, who has worked super hard on all 4 points of this effort. I can't wait until we can all celebrate the successful application and receipt and implementation of this funding. Ms. Collins, from the bottom of my heart and on behalf of so many in Ward 1, thank you. Not sure what's personally more exciting to me, the ability to push forward the electrification of the fleet, or glass recycling, although you've certainly heard more from me about glass recycling than about just about anything else. Thank you again. I really appreciate the hard work that's gone into this.
Thank you,
Any other
Councilwoman
questions
Hall.
from council or committee members? Can I get a motion for suspension of the rules?
I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules.
Have a motion
Second.
and a second. All in favor? Ayes have it. Next piece is ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service or his designee without the formality of publicly advertising for bids with the Akron Energy Systems, Inc. for the replacement of the HVAC control systems at the Harold K. Stubbs Building and the MSC Building 1 and declaring an emergency. Mr. Luttle?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of committee. Both these systems are outdated systems. One's a Train system, one's a Honeywell system. And for you that have been in Stubbs before, you know it's hot in the summer and cold in the winter, or it's hot in the winter and cold in the summer, either way. So both of these have been off numerous times, and we'd like to upgrade them. By doing this upgrade, we feel like doing a new energy management system, we're going to save money over time and obviously raise the comfort level of both these systems. Akron Energy Systems will be doing this work for us. This is to purchase all the hardware and software to upgrade both of these systems. With that, consent's fine. I could take any questions.
Any questions from committee members? Council members? Chris, they're on a steam over there like everyone else downtown. How do they?
Well, what happens is the steam's converted to hot water, then the hot water runs through a coil, and then it's the air handler, and they're bringing in outside air. Okay, so if those control systems aren't regulated correctly, failing valves, that's where you get the overheating and overcooling. So that's a big part of the energy management of it. You know, a day like today, you don't need any heat, but you need to bring in outside air, you know. And that stuff just isn't, it's failing. The new controls is going to make that, you know, a lot more efficient system.
Okay. Although they do need a new building. I'll put that on the record again and again. Great for the HVAC, but they definitely need a new
Yes.
building. Any other questions or comments? If not, can I get a motion for suspension of the rules?
Motion to suspend with a favorable recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Next one is ordinance authorizing Director of Public Service to enter into a contract or contracts after publicly advertising for bids for the construction of the North Side Interceptor Tunnel with the AEC-ACOM for design services, with Tamarios for construction management services, with Ohio Edison and/or Dominion Energy Ohio for utility and relocation services. This one doesn't have declaring emergency on it. Is there a reason why?
I was just looking at that. It looks like the title clause we originally got alters a little bit from the legislation itself. Can I read in what we have on the
Yes,
legislation?
please.
Ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service to enter into a contract or contracts after publicly advertising for bids for the construction of the North Side Interceptor Tunnel, the project, authorizing the Director of Public Service without the formality of publicly advertising for bids to enter into a contract or contracts with AUCOM for the design services for the project, authorizing the Director of Public Service without the formality of publicly advertising for bids to enter into a contract or contracts with Tamarios for construction management services for the project, authorizing the Director of Public Service without the formality of publicly advertising for bids with Ohio Edison Company and/or Dominion Energy Ohio for utility and relocation services necessary for the project and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Mr. Luttle?
Okay, Madam Chair, members of committee, we've been talking about this consent decree tunnel for a couple years now. We've gone back and forth with the Ohio and US EPA. This council approved the two projects of lining the sewer on Peck Road and the separation of Rack 34, both last year. The lining project's about 50% done. The separation project up in North Hill is going to start here probably in about a month or 6 weeks. So what we have here is a 16-foot diameter tunnel. We've done a new project estimate, and we also took the consent decree tunnel. Now we're about 58 million lower than the consent decree tunnel, but we're still a lot higher than was set forth in the consent decree, obviously. So this $290 million project, including the design services, which we hired AECom back in 22, I believe. We hired them February of 22 to do the design on this because we had to meet the consent decree. And then we went through quite a process on some construction management companies, and we used the qualification-based solutions. So we submitted for proposals on that, and that's how Tamarius was chosen. Obviously, Ohio Edison, we brought legislation in for the electric about a month or 6 weeks ago. That's why they're on here. So before, we would just have the construction legislation, not the design, not the construction management in the legislation, but this has everything in it. Now, with that being said, we're hoping these bids come in a lot lower than estimated, and you're going to see the bond legislation here in a little bit in budget and finance. So with that being said, we do have a contingency on there about I think it's 20%, 25%. Oh, 5%, I'm sorry. I have Heather here, she knows more about it than, she's been living this, if anybody has any specific questions about the tunnel. But right now, we've shortlisted it down to 4 companies. We expect the bids in June. We are going to award this project July 10th, I believe is the date, and then we will give them a notice to proceed, and then they're going to start moving dirt this fall to meet that December 31st, 2026 deadline to get this tunnel done. So with that, I will take any questions.
So the 4 companies, can you email us that?
The companies that are shortlisted?
Yes.
Sure.
Okay.
They're all national companies. Is there somebody from Cleveland, Heather? One, yeah. Yeah, that's probably the closest company. Everybody else is kind of a national. Obviously, this is very specialized.
Right, and what about the AECom?
AECom, they're a designer.
Are they local?
They have an office here on White Pond, right behind Dionisi's back in there. They have one of the buildings back there. Yep. We went through and looked at those designs too. DLZ designed the other tunnel, and we looked at them, and you know, to put this before us, I would venture to say they spent $40,000, $50,000 to put the project together. So that's kind of sometimes that's why we like to put out an RFQ to see who's qualified, and then we shortlist, because we don't want 10 companies bidding on us and spending that kind of money, right, and someone just throwing a number at it. So AECom has designed tunnels all over the world. We looked at their staffing, and their one gentleman that's here on staff and who will be here through the project is local. He lives in Columbus, I believe, doesn't he? Cleveland, okay. But anyway, you know, he come off a job overseas. I don't know where he was working, somewhere overseas, and he was available, so that's why we decided their proposal was better. Obviously, we got pricing from them, and that's how they were picked, yes.
Okay, last question. I see Tamario's will be the construction management managers on the project. There's the line item for planning. Is that 10 million? It's on the 4th page, last page.
I'm sorry, what was the question on planning?
Yeah, planning. Where's the planning? There's no line item for who's doing the planning. Is that just in-house? Is that the city? Or is there a specific?
Heather will answer that.
Okay.
Do you want me to go right here? Okay, do I have to turn it on?
It should be on.
Oh, okay, for the record, Heather Ollinger from the Engineering Bureau. The planning was a contract that we had with Burgess and Nyepel, and we started that in 2019. So that was to progress the project from what we had at the integrated plan to where AECom picked up with the design. So we did soil borings, we did flow monitoring in the sewer, we built out a hydraulic model extensively, and we were looking at different alternatives for the project to avoid doing a tunnel. And so we were looking at sewer separations and replacing the sewer, and that was work that was done in 2020 and 2021.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
So we had to do that anyway to resize the tunnel. And as Heather said, our first direction in the integrated plan was, let's not do another tunnel. Let's separate the whole area. Well, the drainage area of RAC 35 was so huge. It was all the way over on Home Avenue, Independence. You had to put new sewers under Route 8. And once they start doing that planning, they found that the escalation in cost to do a separation of this whole area and not do a tunnel would have been $364 million. So a lot more money would have been spent than doing the other one. And what would have been the benefit? Yeah, a lot of new streets could have been done, but a lot more disruption on North Hill. So we didn't feel like it was very judicious to spend another $50 million to do separation. But what that money allowed us to do is really do the right size tunnel. That really helped us when we proposed it to the EPA. I mean, obviously nothing is a slam dunk, but all that work that went into it helped us put forth that this 24-foot diameter tunnel was not needed. We could do a 16-foot inside diameter tunnel, and that's where we got to. So.
Okay. All righty. Any questions from committee members? No? Any questions from council members? Seeing none, can I get a motion for consent?
Motion for consent.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Next piece is an ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service without formality of publicly advertising for bids to enter into a contract or contracts with Burgess and Nyepel, Inc. for professional engineering services for the Forest Main Rehabilitation Project and declaring an emergency. Mr. Lettle.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of committee. Yes, we're doing a design on our forest main from our plant all the way down in our system. Obviously, this is a 1912 forest main, so we have to look at replacing about 600 feet of that original forest main because of corrosion. We are going to replace 4,100 feet of the original 1990 forest main by Kent Roosevelt High School, including some crossover valves, some new vaults, mag meters. Memorial Parkway, we have some work down there. So this is just for the design, okay? We have to go, once we do this design, we're obviously gonna go after some infrastructure money to do this project, because this project alone is well over 10 million to do all this work. So this is down the road, but we have to do this work, this design work, to go after that monies.
Okay. All right, any questions from committee members? Any questions from council members? Councilman Malik?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Lettle. Is there a reason why we didn't solicit bids for this?
Well, every year with our engineering firms, they submit, we put out, it's almost like a menu. They put out all their available staff, and they put down all their prices, what they charge. So we've always went through, instead of bidding these projects, is we go through and we look at the availability, their experience in this type of work, and then we look at 3 or 4 firms. Engineering does that, and then they'll narrow it down to 1, 2, and 3 with their recommendations, and then we pick from there. So its biggest thing is who they have available at the time to do this work and the experience to do this work.
I appreciate the explanation, Mr. Lettle, and I'm glad that there is some form of competitive analysis there.
quick question. Heather, on the last piece, we were talking about the planning part, and you said Burgess and Nipple. Is this the same company on this one? Okay. All righty. Mr. Ludlow, what's your pleasure?
Consent's fine.
Can I get a motion for consent?
Motion for consent.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Next piece is ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service without the formality of publicly advertising for bids to enter into a contract or contracts with CTI Engineers, Inc. for professional engineering services for the high service pump, ball valve, and limit torque manual valve replacement project and declaring an emergency. Mr. Ludlow?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. Obviously, at our water plant, we have 6 high-service pumps. And even though they all have VFD, variable frequency drives on them, what we have to do is those valves stay closed till that pump starts. So we limit any backflow into those pumps. So what we're having is we're having some issues with the pumps, so we want to replace all 6 of those valves. So what they're designing is new valves. They're designing, what they are is a very slow opening valve. So when that pump starts, that valve will open up slowly to limit any water hammer out in the system. If you can imagine something that's going to be pumping 4 or 5 million gallons a day, it's a high service pump. It's very critical not to water hammer our system because it could turn into, maybe water main breaks or that type of thing out in the system. So we have to do this design before we purchase these valves and install them. That'll be a different project altogether.
Okay, all righty. Questions from committee members? Questions from council members? Seeing none, Mr. Little, what's your pleasure?
Consent's fine.
Can I get a motion for consent?
Motion for consent.
Second.
A motion and a second, all in favor? Aye. Ayes have it. Next piece is an ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service without the formality of publicly advertising for bids to enter into a contract or contracts with the CT Consultants, Inc. for professional engineering services for the Portage Lakes Water Main Extension Project and declaring an emergency. Mr. Ludlow?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of committee. Out in our Coventry system, off of Port of the Lakes Drive and Turkey Foot there, anything really south of the clock tower, there's no water. It's all water. They're all wells. They've got a couple public water systems, which means they have a well that services more than one, and they really have a critical problem down there. Okay, they've asked us to extend our water mains. Now, as we did before in Copley, we would not extend these water mains unless we get 100% funding between the residents that would pay tap-in fees and the Ohio EPA or wherever we could get grant money for. So we're putting this project together to extend this water main, connect all these customers. We've had 2 public meetings down there. It seems very favorable when we give them an estimate of what it's going to cost. Some are like all in, or some are still hesitant. But when they don't have any other availability of water, they don't really have much choice. But just to be clear, this will be funded 100%. Akron residents will not be funding this, okay? This design will come out of other revenues, but we are actively talking to the Ohio EPA to get funding on this project. And consent would be fine.
What happens if they don't give us the funding?
Then we don't do the project.
Okay. All right. Any questions from committee members? Any questions from council members? I'm seeing none. Can I get a motion for consent?
Motion for consent.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Next piece, last piece, ordinance authorizing Director of Public Service without the formality of publicly advertising for bids to enter into a contract or contracts with Arcadis US Inc. for professional engineering services for the water distribution hydraulic model update project and declaring an emergency. Mr. Ludlow?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. Yes, Arcadis is going to update our hydraulic model. This is something that we do. I don't know how many every 5 or 10 years we do this, but every time we do a water main extension or we eliminate something, we have to go back and do a new hydraulic model. Currently, one of the areas we're going to be looking at right now is Chapel Hill Mall. They have a water tower that's not owned by us, it's owned by others, and we're looking, can we do a pump station up there to eliminate that tower? That's one of the things this hydraulic model will show. If just like this Portage Lakes Drive, you want to extend water down there, can we actually extend water down there without, you know, doing something to the rest of our distribution system? What sizes those lines have to be? That would be in that design. But this hydraulic model, do we need that water tower? Do we need that? Do we increase something? I can tell you this, unfortunately, our pumpage up at Kent, it's down because I would love to say it's down because we've eliminated a lot of the water main leakers or breaks over the years, but I think it's just for usage. We're down to probably a 40-year low, and that's a good thing. We're not wasting water, but unfortunately, I think it may have a lot to do with our consent decree and people conserving water, you know, not like they used to. But this hydraulic model will allow us to, when we do water main extensions, to you know, show that availability on what can and what can't be done.
Okay.
And consent's fine.
Okay. Any questions from committee members? Any questions from council members? Oh, Councilwoman Holland?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Luddle, just going to revisit a previously asked question on these other sole source, no bid situations. Are we to understand that in this instance that this is a contract service provider who has a specific, unique, one-of-a-kind type capacity and expertise for this work?
Yes, I mean, we've used them before. I mean, one thing to be specific, on all 4 of these pieces, they're all Akron companies, okay? They're all here in Akron. They all use our student engineer program. They all hire our student engineers over the years, but they are specific. Arcadis is the one, and you're familiar with it, the lining project up North Street and across Valley. You know, they did that inundation. If that water main would have broke, what would have happened? And what would have happened to our hydraulic model? So yes, they are specific. They are a modeling company. They have helped us before on our consent decree, but they have quite a few people that are specified in modeling in this hydraulic, in doing this type of work, absolutely.
Very good, thank you.
Any other questions from committee members, council members? Mr. Luddle, what's your pleasure?
Consent's fine.
Can I get a motion for consent?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Seeing we have nothing else coming before us, we are adjourned.
That's enough.
Our next committee of the day will be the Budget and Finance Committee. Those committee members are Freeman, Amobian, Malik, Baylor, and Lombardo. We'll give everyone just a moment here to turn their video on and change seats. Thanks.
Sarah, I want to make sure I have audio here.
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you.
We're ready here in chambers whenever you are, Mr. Chair.
Okay, very good. All right, it is now 3:14. I'd like to call the Budget and Finance Committee meeting to order. If we could please have a roll call.
Freeman,
Here.
Amobian,
Here.
Malik,
Here.
Baylor,
Aye.
and Lombardo.
Aye.
All committee members are present.
Thank you. And do I have a motion to accept the minutes from the last meeting, please?
So moved. Second.
I have a motion, a second. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. All right, we have one item coming before us. Ms. Viviano, I'm going to ask if you could please read that in for us.
Item number 1 is an ordinance authorizing the issuance of a bond of the city in a principal amount not to exceed $295 million for sale to the Water Pollution Control Loan Fund of the State of Ohio to finance the costs of North Side Interceptor Tunnel Project, pledging certain revenues from the city's wastewater system on a subordinated basis to secure the payment of the principal of and interest on the bond, and authorizing the execution and delivery of the bond, the trust agreement and other documents, and the taking of other actions related to the issuance and sale of the bond, and declaring an emergency.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So,
Thank you very much for doing that.
yeah. So you just heard Mr. Luddle talk about the Northside Interceptor Tunnel. This is the financing that will be used to pay for that project. So we have a bond amount of $295 million. This will be 45-year financing. Currently, the interest rate is set, this will not be the final interest rate, but currently it's sitting at 2.93%. That interest rate will be determined in August. That's when the loan agreement will be finalized. We anticipate the debt service on this project will be approximately $12 million a year. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Okay, thank you. So all of us that were listening on the public service, we heard Mr. Little talk about that project. We're now talking about the financing of this project. So I will open the floor for any questions or comments. And Mr. Fricker, as we were talking, obviously over the years, we've had a lot of these things come before us. This is a big chunk, and I'd asked you, do we anticipate any other, issues like this coming before us as we continue with the project? You could maybe share with everyone your answer.
So I think I'll let Mr. Luddle answer that. I believe this is the largest remaining project. I know there's one other contemplated project that will also be a large one, but I think that's something that we are kind of working out right now. I'll let Mr. Luddle address that.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, this is the largest project left. The last project we're in negotiation to reduce the cost of that one, but it's not as costly as this one, estimated, as you said. One thing we are doing with this project, sir, you're very familiar, over the years we've went after WRRSP, where we sponsored with this interest. We've sponsored other projects around the state. Heather is currently working with 7 different projects around the state to give us an interest reduction of 0.06%, which is about $5 million over the life of the loan. And basically all we're doing is sponsoring. We don't have to do anything with those projects. One thing, this project is, the consent decree is at the end of 26, and as you know, on these loans, we don't start paying this back till after that's set forth in the, so they'll be paying out the contractor, they'll be paying out the designer, that type of thing, but we will not start paying back till that set date, which should be, it's only twice a year, I believe, right?
So,
January
so
and
it's
July.
anticipated the debt service on this project would start either in January or July of 2028.
And Mr. Fricker, you had indicated, we talked today, that we're in kind of a negotiation now with the EPA as far as the necessity for the EHRT facility. Maybe you can say a little more about that.
I guess I could touch on that, sir.
Okay.
There's been a little bit, we've been working with them back and forth, because in the consent decree when we signed it, the OSIT tunnel, the one we finished, the model showed that it would overflow 7 times in the typical year storm, okay? When we finished that project and we went through a whole hydraulic model of our system, it's down to 3 times in the typical year. So it has really reduced, and I don't want to jinx ourselves, but knock on wood, the tunnel hasn't overflowed in well over a year. I think it's been 425 days where it hasn't overflowed at all. So the diminished return on building that facility, we don't think is warranted. We are working with them on some other projects to offset some of that, but right now, I can't elaborate any more than that. Like I said, we're still in negotiations with the US EPA and the Department of Justice.
Would I be out of bounds to ask estimated time when we might have a final decision on that?
You would not be out of bounds, but I wish I could answer it, sir.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, looking for any other questions? And if you're in chambers, I cannot see your hands, so just please feel free to speak up. Okay, I do not see any hands on my screen here. Any questions or comments? What would be your pleasure, Mr. Tricker?
Consent is fine.
Okay,
Mr. Freeman, I'd make a motion for consent.
we have a motion for consent.
Second?
We have a second. All in favor, please let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, very good. And I think it would be a disservice not to end this committee meeting just with a word of thanks to the administration for the millions of dollars that we have saved just in the past 8 years here because of your good work. So, Mr. Ludell, I know you've been a big part of that. Thank you so very, very much. It is now 3:21 p.m. We have nothing else to come before us, and we are adjourned. Thank you.
That is the final committee meeting of the day. Council will meet at 7 p.m. tonight. Thank you.